Alrighty, welcome into another edition of the Shatter the Script podcast. I'm joined by your host. I'm Jared May, and I'm joined with the medical guy, Jacob, here as well. Surviving another snow blast from Texas or whatever. Houston got a bunch of inches of snow. We want to give a quick congratulations to the analyst. He is now a father. So
There we go.
just as we did for you not too long ago, congratulations to the analyst. So he's busy tending to that. So congratulations to him. But yeah, down to brass and tacks. We're going to get into a lot of discussion on the NFC or NFL divisional playoff weekend, as well as the national championship. And we'll probably dive in a little bit to kind of the Dallas Cowboys head coaching carousel, as that's kind of what we're, LOL, an expert in.
Yeah.
For that sort of discussions and topics and whatnot. And of course, we'll incorporate the DB list within the episode. But yeah, we kind of wanted to open it up as like a broad discussion, because there's a lot that can go on in a playoff weekend to where you're like, okay, we're going to talk about the Mahomes penalty. And you're like, okay, like we all saw that. But the things we didn't see, like certain different aspects in the Texans and Chiefs game that people might have missed and overlooked because the headlines were so taken over by like Troy Aikman's comments or something like that. Or, in the Lions and Commanders game, almost said the other word. almost got, the Lions and Commanders game, what is within that? The national championship itself, or college football playoff in general. So we want to cover that all in retrospect. So we'll start in the NFL atmosphere. Obviously, we've got the championship games coming up this weekend, and the divisional was this past weekend. And this consisted of, Texans and Chiefs, Lions and Commanders, Bills and Ravens, and I'm probably forgetting one. But, Eagles and Rams.
Yeah.
And it kind of caught the initial burst of like the snow hitting almost all of these playoff games. So I guess what was your biggest takeaway when you were looking at the divisional and you were watching it? And I guess we can kind of start with the Texans Chiefs, because we talked about that one off the record a little bit. It's like, in this game, there was obviously the penalties and whatnot, but some things went unnoticed. And what were your takes on kind of the divisional weekend and the Texans and Chiefs, maybe in specific, however you want to take it?
Yeah. And so for the Texans specifically, I know we mentioned a little bit off script, and I'll let you talk about, what's your biggest takeaway. But my biggest takeaway with the Texans was just them having to take a step back and look in the mirror at that offense. And so I kind of went and looked at like the last few games the Texans played, and I know they had the injuries and everything all year, and I know the offensive line was not great, of course, but like the last, let's look, 8 games, okay?
Yeah.
So the Texans 14-32 against the Chargers, which we saw that was a lot of the defense, okay?
Yes.
23 versus the Titans.
Unless
Two.
Cooper Rush is quarterback.
Yeah. Two versus the Ravens, 19 versus the Chiefs, 20 versus the Dolphins, 23 on a sneak out win versus the Texans. They got beat by the Titans and only scored 27. And then, the last time they played the Cowboys, obviously we saw how that went and whatnot. But if you look at it, and we've talked about it all year, about just the absolute regression of this offense. I don't know if it's become predictable. It's not one-dimensional because, they have the weapons, and going into it, the biggest thing that we talked about with the Texans was like their O-line was going to be better. They signed a lot of guys. They have Tunzel, they have Green, they have all these guys that were primarily healthy through a majority of the year. But
Yeah.
then I think Brian said that C.J. Stroud got sacked 8 times.
Yes,
Like,
8 times. Yeah.
Like I understand, and not all of those are like people are rushing free. I mean, some of those are coverage sacks. And at that point, it just looked like, and we mentioned it multiple times, that the Texans offense just got stale. Like it was either boom or bust with that offense. Nico Collins going for 150 and two
Yeah.
touchdowns, and Joe Mixon going for another buck 50 and a couple of touchdowns, or it was nothing.
Right.
And so, to me, I think that's the biggest takeaway from the Texans for me this weekend is what are they going to do about that offense? You know, a year of film, a year of kind of learning certain things. Obviously, the line was not great, but I mean, we saw, plenty of other QBs that have dealt with line issues. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, Joe Burrow with his offensive line was not great. This weekend we watched. I mean, Lamar Jackson obviously he uses one of his good abilities, but his O line was not great, and he made things happen.
Yeah.
The Rams, their O line is iffy. Commanders, same thing. And then so it's just going to be interesting to see what the Texans do for because they are in that window to where they should, and I think they can be a contender. I mean, we saw last year where we are like, oh, well, this team's got to blow up this year.
Yeah.
And yes, they beat the Chargers, but at the same time, it was Chargers, man. Like
Yeah.
they kind of snuck in. We knew what they were about. If they were to win a game, it was going to be 17-14. And so for
Correct.
me, it's going to
Couldn't
be
agree.
what's D'Amico Ryans, who's got obviously a crazy good defense, and it's kind of these dudes he's kind of inherited a few of them and drafted a few of them. They seem like they're going to be a cornerstone of that team, but you've got the weapons on offense. What are we going to do about it? Because, I mean, that's just the thing is like,
Yeah.
you've got top notch weapons. You've got a good slot. You've got a good number one. You've got a stud running back. Hell, you've got two good backup running backs. You've got a big big name O line, and
Yeah.
you've got a solid quarterback that can throw the ball. To me personally, I think you've got to start incorporating CJ Stroud a little bit in his QB run.
Yeah.
I know he came out of college and said like, "Hey, I don't run very much. I don't want to." But like you see him and like, dude, you've got some escapability. And just like with like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, that just gives another aspect of that offense that could take pressure off that O line to where they're not sending everybody in contain and hitting you right up the middle. And so that was the biggest takeaway that I saw, especially from the Texans this whole year,
Yeah.
is like what's up with that offense? It just something wasn't clicking. And
Right.
so that was kind of my biggest take from them.
Yeah.
And the Chiefs, it's the same thing I said last year with them. They're inevitable. They just figure out ways to win. I know they have great coaches. I mean, they have decent players, but I mean, they don't really have a number one. Travis Kelsey turned it on, obviously, but you could see like he's not the same. Like
Yeah.
he knows it. Like it really reminds me of like Jason Witten towards the end of his career, where I mean, he just found the soft part of the zone,
Yeah.
and
Option routes and
yeah,
just sat down.
and if nobody was around him, yeah, he could eventually get going. But like he doesn't have the same escapability and maneuverability that he used to. And so like yes, he went for a lot, but at the same time, like there's plenty of that stuff where it's, a 3rd and 7 and like he's settling down 7.5 yards and boom. And
Yeah. Move the
so
chains.
I
Yeah.
mean they just seem just on a different level.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I have about the Chiefs is they just keep figuring it out.
Yeah. No, I think you hit on a lot of points, and what's crazy is that you mentioned the injuries and whatnot. It's like, yeah, when you look at the Chiefs on offense, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
they've withstood a ton of injuries, especially with Rashi Rice. They didn't have Hollywood Brown all year. They were missing Pacheco for 75% of the season, and they still find a way to go 15-1. And yeah, they got to a lot of like one score games, and that seems incredible to a lot of fans because you're like, how in the world does this team keep winning? And it's like, okay, well, they got a formula, obviously, where it's like, well, we're not going to blow up the scoreboard like maybe Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson does, but Mahomes knows how to win a football game.
Yeah.
And, you can call it, you can say the penalties played a factor, whatever. So honestly, what you were talking about with him getting sacked 8 times, I believe he got, well, I'm looking at the stats here. It's like 72, almost over 72% of the pressure CJ Stroud faced turned into sacks.
Yeah.
And in this game. Then I saw another post that he was pressured over 56% of the time behind his offensive line. And they're like, the commentary was Bobby Slowick has to make a change if we're going to continue with him as offensive coordinator. And
Exactly.
honestly, like looking at it from that perspective, you're like, well, people might say, well, you can't pin that. You got to pin that on the offensive line. It's like, well, no, not really. you kind of have to pin that on the offensive coordinator who has weeks and weeks and weeks of learning about this pressure rate. I mean, you go through another statistic that I'm looking here from a guy. It's like CJ Stroud pressure rate by week: 31% in week 1, 30 in week 2, 35 in week 3. Week 4 went down, week 5 went up, all the way down. And then week 7, 8, and 9, as the weeks progressed, it got over 50%
Yeah.
continuously. And so it's like, okay, what changed? You had Mixon, a strong running back who was phenomenal every game, essentially, that he was healthy. So you have a running game. You can use the play action to get out in space and to give Stroud those opportunities to get mobile. And it's just one of those things that you get mad at head coaches for, because it's like, and coordinators is the adaptability.
Yeah.
And you see these statistics, and everybody goes by the analytics these days, and you don't have a solution as to, we're moving the football all the way down the field, but then we just get sacked 3 or 4 times. Like, that's unacceptable for an offense coordinator. So that's kind of where I stood on it, the big takeaway, because we pointed out off the record that, they went to the red zone 6 or 7 times and came up with one touchdown at the beginning where they missed a field goal.
Yeah.
Or the extra point. That's unacceptable. That's not going to win against the best team in the NFL in terms of wins. It's just not a recipe for success. So, yeah, I agree with what you were getting at there, and I think they're going to have to go in and, they say sophomore slump. This was a big one.
Yeah, there was a big regression, and like I said, I don't think it's all on Stroud or some of the players, but I even mentioned it in that game. Does he know do they know what a quick route is?
Right.
Something that at least you could be the Bengals did great with it, where they would use their running backs as basically runs. And I mean, you get a running back on a linebacker or someone in space, and even if it's for 2 yards, right? You at least make the defense think oh, well, man, if he didn't make that tackle, that could have been a house call. Right. Or something like that. It makes them just think about it at least. But like you said, pressure in almost 2/3 of the game, that's crazy.
Yeah.
To not change something up.
Exactly. And as offensive coordinators, we all know some of them are getting hired to different teams and whatnot, some big names. But those guys are praised for their adaptability. Yeah. Where it's okay, the Lions, well, they're probably the most injured team. And I guess we'll transition kind of into the Lions and Commanders. But the Lions was probably the most injured team in the NFL this year. And, it was more on the defensive side. But we knew it was going to play a factor when it came to the playoff run. And we were worried, it's okay, Aaron Glenn did a phenomenal job and everybody was healthy. They were clearly the best team in the NFL. And it was really hard to deny that. And it was in one of the toughest divisions in football, and did their job, beat Matt LaFleur twice. I think they beat Kevin O'Connell twice. They beat Caleb Williams twice. I mean, just ran through the hardest division. And once they sustained all these injuries, it was okay, well, how are they going to fare against the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, a rookie quarterback, and a first-year head coach, in the building head coach, Dan Quinn?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to hang up 31 points at the half. And it's
yeah.
That's just completely out of left field, completely unexpected. We kind of knew going into this game it was going to be a shootout. But I guess, would you argue that Jaden Daniels is the best performing quarterback right now in the playoffs? Left, I guess, in the pool. Obviously, he's not a better quarterback than Mahomes or Josh Allen as of yet. And there's a lot of hypotheticals. I'm saying today, this season going in, there's been a lot of discussion around it. It's do we fear him the most, or is he one of those guys where it's okay, you got your run at your depleted defense. Now you're going to go play the Eagles. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to piece it together.
Yeah, I mean, you could say this past weekend he was the most impressive quarterback that played, because you knew what kind of you knew going into this game and this is going to sound stupid to say, but you had to outscore the Lions, not you had to get enough points kind of thing, or your defense was going to do something crazy, because you knew which their defense did do something crazy with five turnovers. But
Yeah.
like you knew, like 30 points weren't going to beat the Lions, and to be a rookie quarterback and to go out there and just control the game. And I know everybody talks about it, but like if you watched him, like he looked like he could have been sitting on the couch, like when the defense was on the field, like he looked like he was just chilling at home. Like no,
Yeah.
like pulse was low, heart rate was low, blood pressure was chilling. Like he looked like he had no anxiousness about him.
Yeah.
And so that's what was impressive is like you're going up against a team that's 15-2, one of the best records in the NFL, one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL. And like you knew going into that game, like you had to be damn near perfect
Right.
to beat this team. And he essentially as close as you could get to it. And that's just the most impressive thing. So I'd agree with you saying that like he was the most impressive quarterback from this weekend, specifically because you didn't know what he was going to do in the biggest game, and you didn't know how he was going to handle the pressure of knowing like, hey, this is going to ride on you a lot. So
Yes.
because I mean they don't have a running back. Like yes, you can look at Robinson Jr. or Eckler, but like that offense has not been a control the game offense all year. And so you knew they weren't just going to sit there and Saquon Barkley it. And so you knew it was like, hey, this is on you. And so that was super impressive. So I would agree with you, say he was the best quarterback from this weekend.
Yeah. And they got to 12-5, and there've been other 12-5 teams in recent memory where you go, well, that's not a real team. And so you go through it and it's like, can you get to the championship game? It's like they got to it in 1 year. A poverty franchise got to it in 1 year. They changed owners and made it to a championship game with, of course, the other NFC East team, the Eagles, with Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. So you get Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore as offensive coordinators in the NFC Championship game. Those names sound familiar? Yeah, they originated from the Dallas Cowboys and were on the same staff. So it's embarrassing as a Cowboys fan, but then you look at it and you go, well, good for them, because now we know what the issue is.
Yeah.
And watching a guy like Jaden Daniels play, I kind of want to relate it back to college, because I find this hilarious because we've made fun of this guy multiple times. The Brian Kelly effect.
Yeah.
This dude had Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, and what did he do with that talent? He made it to the Reliant Quest Bowl.
Yeah.
It just
8-4.
I don't understand it, dude.
Yeah.
If anybody has any hope as an LSU fan, I just had to mention that part with it's like, okay, dude, you had this generational talent on your team, because all three of those guys, rookies, just balled out in contention for offensive rookie of the year, essentially. And it's just interesting to see, and I'm happy for a guy like Dan Quinn, because we knew he was a good coordinator.
Yeah.
At times.
But against
you're 100% right in the fact that it's like you have to you can't game manage essentially against the Lions offense. You have to outscore them. You have to throw up 35, 38 points in order to get a win. And he did it. In flying fashion. I mean, he was the most efficient quarterback of the weekend. I mean, you move over to Jalen Hurts. I think he threw for 140 yards.
Yeah.
And Josh Allen really didn't do much besides protect the lead, because the Ravens were just causing turnover after turnover after turnover on themselves, shooting themselves in the foot, man. Then it's like, in that game specifically, they're talking about only Mark Andrews. And there's some awful hashtags out there about Mark Andrews. And I don't think you can pin it on. I mean, I understand that he had the drop, he had the fumble, and then you had Lamar fumble. I think Lamar threw a pick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Lamar had 2 turnovers.
Lamar had 2 turnovers. Mark Andrews 2 turnovers. It's like, it's a team ball game. Yeah. And the headlines are going to talk about Lamar blowing it and whatnot, and he did his best to fight back and whatnot. But if you do that against Josh Allen, it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
It's just not. If you are playing the Bills and Josh Allen is barely having to lift a finger, you've lost.
Yeah.
And most of the time when he's lifting both his fingers, he's destroying you. So, it's just, it was a recipe for disaster for Lamar, and his playoff stats are kind of intriguing.
Yeah. And I mean, it just, goes to why we're giving so much praise to Jaden Daniels is like you see someone who is probably going to be a third-time MVP winner, and you see just how much different the playoffs are than the regular season. And so you see someone like Lamar, who I don't think he was just terrible, but he wasn't the regular season Lamar. And that's been kind of the knock on him. Is like, yeah, you're about to have 3 MVPs, dude. But like when you go and look at his postseason stats, they're much lower. I mean, what did he have? 3 turnovers this year, or 4 interceptions
Yeah,
this year. 3 of them, which basically his receivers handed it to the other team, kind of thing.
correct.
And
Yeah,
then you go and look at the playoffs, and it's not 1-to-1, but it's like 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. Completion rates down, yards per game down, fumbles up, and it's like that's why we give so much praise to Jaden Daniels, because you were going against someone who, or an offense that was just as high and elite as the Bills or any other team in the league, and you went blow for blow with them. And
right.
so I guess moving into this Ravens Bills game, um, my biggest thing is going to be like, this is the Bills' year. Like if you don't do it this
Please.
year, if you don't do it this year, I don't know when. I personally do not, because like you said, you beat the Ravens and you used Josh Allen like Notre Dame used Riley Leonard on the first drive of the national championship. I mean, you look at this and what Josh Allen completed 16 passes. He ran the ball for 10 times for 20 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like you basically said you literally, it's like you looked at Josh Allen and said like, you just can't fumble. You
Yeah,
just can't throw an
play
interception.
like Riley Leonard.
Yeah, you just can't like that, because that's what it looked like. And I know the weather was weird and stuff like that, but like you just won a game where you did minimal on offense. Like you controlled the game against the Ravens,
Yeah,
and that's impressive. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. Is obviously there's been all the talks about Josh Allen, Lamar, Burrow being that next, like who's going to actually knock the king off the mountain. And for me, it's like if the Bills don't do it after seeing what they did this weekend, and you want to talk about low blood pressure, like I mean, it just seemed like they were always in control. And even at the end, when Lamar had that great drive, it was still like, I mean, that was the only time it seemed like they were in contention. And
yeah,
like, yes, it sucks for Mark Andrews and whatever, but like there were other things that went wrong. In the beginning of the game, Lamar was not great. And then he kind of strapped it up. Last drive of the game was really good. And then, all that, the cluster happened. And so, man, it's gonna be a fun weekend this next weekend. I
yeah.
really hope that it's a good game. I really hope it's not. You know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be the opposite of this Bills Ravens game,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be 26-25, and they're gonna go for 2 and win it or something stupid like that, and
Yes.
the Chiefs are
Yes.
gonna win 26-25, and I'm gonna put a hole in my screen. So,
Yes.
what was your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, I thought it was interesting. This is kind of outside the game, a bit, and I found it crazy to know, and I did like my own little research on Lamar, and I wasn't trying to hate on him, but I was like, dude, I cannot remember the last time Lamar Jackson has won a playoff game where the opposing team scored more than 14 points. And so I looked it up, and he has not. There is not a game that Lamar Jackson has won in the playoffs where the opposing team scored more than 14 points, which is nuts because we talked about it in the regular season. Oh, you can give Lamar 7 MVPs if you wanted to. The dude is incredible in the regular season. I get it. He can run for 1,000 yards. He can pass for 3 to 4,000. He can throw 25 plus tutties and get 10 rushing touchdowns and throw less than 10 picks. It's like that's all fine and dandy. But the same argument that arises for other quarterbacks, it just doesn't seem to sometimes apply to a guy like Lamar, who, when he gets to the playoffs, everything just seems to collapse. And it's not all on the quarterback, but Ben Johnson just got through talking about it in his press conference with the Chicago Bears, saying that winning football games in the NFL, much different than it's been in the last 20 or so years, almost solely depends on quarterback efficiency. And that's been a new modernized change in the NFL in like the recent years. And so a guy like Caleb Williams intrigued him. It's like, okay, if that is true, then we have to look at it as a fact that Lamar cannot get it done in the playoffs, a lot like other quarterbacks. And like you said, knock the king off. And Josh Allen does the same thing, except he's a little more successful in the playoffs. He gets to, I guess, this is his fourth time playing the Chiefs in the playoffs. And he beats them every year in the regular season, essentially. It's like, I think he's 3-0 against Mahomes in the regular season. Mahomes is like, I'll let you win this battle. But when the war, no, I'm not going to let you win the war.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, my biggest takeaway with this game in specific is just like, and leading up into the next one, is if you get into a scenario where Josh Allen doesn't have to do much and he's just essentially keeping the ball away from you on offense, I mean,
That's
like
scary.
I mentioned, it's scary. It's one of those things that it's 99% impossible to stop. You have to have him make a mistake, which he rarely does when he has the lead. And so I'm intrigued with this next game when it's like, when you're playing the Chiefs, if you can get this done just once, just one time for your legacy, to say, I knocked off the king and I got to the NFC, and both of those teams, I don't care which one it is, Josh Allen has to beat them.
Yeah.
Their team is so much better than the Commanders and the Eagles, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
So,
to add to your point about the turnover thing, I mean, you could there's one game, okay? I think one game. Let me check this stat real quick. But there is no, there is literally one game where the quarterback having no turnovers, and they won that game. Okay, if you look at the rest of them, Chiefs Texans. Okay, I wouldn't say the quarterback turned it over, but like, you had turnover on downs, you had kicks, you had blocks, stuff like that. Commanders Lions. I mean, they turned the ball over 5 times. You're gonna lose that game. Okay, Rams Eagles. Big time fumble by Matt Stafford, right? Big time fumble, right?
yeah.
And then you look at the Ravens and the Bills, right? They just asked Josh Allen, "Hey, don't be Superman, or don't try to be.
Yeah.
Just don't give the ball to the other team, and we'll live with that." And so I think it adds to your point, and that point with Ben Johnson is about efficiency. Like, hey, if you could just keep the sticks moving, don't turn it over, don't let the momentum just absolutely swing to the other side like that, it usually works out for you.
Yeah. And efficiency doesn't mean throw for 4 billion yards and 7 touchdowns. It could mean I threw 17 times and completed 75% of my passes and no turnovers and moved the chains, and we scored almost every possession. It's like efficiency, right? And that's where quarterback game management gets tossed around in different aspects. It's like, okay, well, we know this guy can be Superman, but when he doesn't need to be, that's a win. That's a win for the head coach. That's a win for the quarterback because it takes stress off of the quarterback. And then, like, I guess the last thing I'll say with the Eagles and the Rams matchup is, boy, if I ever had a running back run for 200 yards in a divisional playoff game, the things I would do. I mean, that has got to put so much weight off of your shoulders to have a guy rush for that. I mean, like, I don't know about in recent memory another running back has done that. Maybe Derrick Henry, but it was just incredible to me. It's like you got this snow game, and you're just like, with a lot of pressure. Jalen Hurts, like, the Rams are not a team to sleep on. I know Matt Stafford was playing with some bruised ribs or whatever, but it's like, bro, 200 yards in a divisional game.
Yeah, that's tough.
Chalk it. Like, see ya.
Well, I remember one. What was it, about 6 years ago? I think it was the Rams, and they did it against a team we know. Oh, the Cowboys. That might have been the last time.
C.J. Anderson, is he still in the NFL?
Yeah, C.J. Anderson. I think it was Todd Gurley was still on there, and it was like, yeah, but yeah, that's tough. But yeah, I think this game it also touches on, like, the point that you just made, and it really drives it home, is like, you didn't need Jalen Hurts to be Superman. You
Yeah.
needed him to control the game, not turn the ball over. I know he had some fumbles, but luckily hopped back on them. But I mean, you let what you were great at control the game, and that was running the football. You didn't need to throw the football, and that's where I think you got to commend Jalen Hurts a little bit because like it's in his ear at all times about throw the football, throw the football, throw the football.
Yeah.
AJ Brown, pursuit of excellence or whatever the book he's reading, and you saw that like, hey, the Rams are loading the box, and we're still. I mean, they at the Eagles. Okay, I know they ran for 200 yards with Saquon Barkley. They averaged 8.4 yards on the ground.
Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Run the
Guess
ball.
guess what? A yard. You have a yard. So first down, you run the ball. You're at second and 1.5, 2. Well, what is Philly great at? The push.
Yeah.
The push tush. Tush.
You do
Push.
it two times in a row. You ain't.
That's what I'm saying, and it's like, and that's where a good thing came out that Cam Jordan was talking about on a podcast about like, and you talked about it with the sacks and the stats and whatnot. What do you want to do? Do you want to be an NFL record holder and do all this stuff, or do you want to win ball games? And I think that's where you really have to. And I know Jalen Hurts gets a lot of hate, but you got to commend that and that coaching staff because they were like, hey, we don't need to put up 45 points. We don't need Jalen Hurts to throw it 38 times. Let's run it 34 times and do what we can control
Yeah.
and win a ball game. And like no one cares if you win the ball game. Like I know
Yeah.
some people have to bring it up because of, you got to get the clickbait and whatever, but who cares? Win a ball game. Guess what?
Yeah.
Philly's in the NFC Championship. Who cares?
You think Jalen Hurts cares that he threw for 140 yards? Probably not. Like
No.
I know I'm not the biggest fan of Jalen Hurts, and I might knock him for not throwing for that many yards. I'm not knocking him for his talent and for throwing less than 200 yards. I'm knocking the argument that he is the most valuable on that unit.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I get told a lot of times, oh, Jalen Hurts, oh, he's a god, he's blah, blah, blah. It's like, go look at what he's had to do in the playoffs, the team he's faced in the run. It's like, that's a dream come true. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in the playoffs and you don't have to lift a finger, who's complaining? Like, that's called the formula to win. That's why, you might say Mahomes hasn't done anything phenomenal with stats in the past, 1 or 2 years. Who cares? He went 15-1. He's in the AFC Championship game, going for the first ever NFL three-peat.
Yeah.
There's a recipe, and it's like, it's what we talk about with coordinating and head coaching. Why are we overcomplicating this? Why are we overcomplicating giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the goal line? Just give it to him. Like, it just makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
And some coaches don't understand that, and the ones that do, well, they find themselves in the big dance. So,
Exactly.
just end all be all there. But yeah, that kind of covers the NFL divisional weekend. We'll talk more about the championship game weekend next week once it happens. But yeah, I think we should get into a little bit of the DB list. The DB list candidates, the down bad list.
All right, I have a few candidates. I'm gonna put me at one. Okay.
Shit.
Went to the dentist today, and I hate the dentist. Okay, I know everybody does, but I had a pretty traumatic experience where the numbing medicine wore off in the middle of a procedure, and I had to basically, I had too many teeth in my mouth, and I had to get 4 pulled, and I felt all 4 of them.
Good God.
And so that was when I was like 10. So it sucked, and I've never liked it since. And so I had to go today for the first time in I'd say a long time, and because my teeth have been hurting, and got told that I will need a root canal. So DB list Jacob's teeth, or 2.
Numb that shit up.
Yeah, and so they were like, "Dude, would you like the numbing gas?" I'm like, "Bro, you could put morphine in my body. Like, you could tell me, like, hey, this isn't necessarily regulated by the drug by America's Drug Association, but it'll help, and you won't feel anything." I'd be like, "Sure, go ahead." As long as it's not like heroin, we're great. And so,
Right.
So yeah, that's my first DB list candidate for me And then I'll just do my second one, and then we'll go to you, and then we could talk about our other ones. My second one has to be that golf cart driver for the national championship game that had the head coach and the quarterback on it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, she just absolutely pile drived the wall
Oh yeah.
and probably broke the steering column on it. And as you could see, they couldn't move it, and they had to get up and everything. And so that set them back, like 50 years for how
Yeah.
they're able to manage a vehicle. Unfortunately, but it was just tough. It's like, hey, you got the head coach, you got the quarterback, the MVP of the whatever, and like, hey, you could Austin Powers this thing, like you could, and no, you were like, oh yeah, I got it, boom,
Wow.
and then it's like, hey, Mister Ryan, you've got to walk to the locker room, like,
Oh yeah, dude.
yeah, it
Send him
was,
back 50 years, like you mentioned. God.
yeah. So that was tough. So those are my top two right there. So what you got for your top two?
Yeah, mine kind of centralizes around inauguration day.
Oh, here
There
we
was
go.
some funny stuff that happened because Trump's cabinet is kind of filled with a lot of big name characters,
Yeah.
and honestly, I'm going to choose kind of three all within one. And the first one, and honestly, I'm not going to knock the guy for it. I just think the media reaction was hilarious. Was Mark Zuckerberg taking a look at the cans at the inauguration day? Bezos' honey boo boo was sitting there next to him, and he was taking a little looksy pooksy um, throughout the entire day of the inauguration. And to RFK's credit, he passed the test. She turned toward him, and RFK was like, "Huh? What? These lights are
Yeah.
incredible looking. I never noticed how bright these
Yeah.
lights were." And
Come
and so
on.
kind of the media is going off on whatever her name is. But it was just pretty funny to see him kind of take a couple glances over
Yeah.
during the inauguration. They get
Oh
bored
my.
in there. We're
Oh
men.
my
We get
God.
bored.
The floor tile is nice. Like,
Yeah,
oh
this
my
is
God.
God.
Oh
What tie
I
am I
didn't know
wearing
my
right now?
tie was so crooked. God,
Is it
my
hot in
pocket
here?
square. Yeah. Does anybody got a water? Jesus.
Yeah, literally. And the other one was Theo Vaughn
Oh God.
at the thing, and it just kind of like the whole vlog group, because I don't know, I understand it kind of got hashed out between all of them, but
Yeah.
kind of pulling pranks at inauguration day just doesn't seem like the time and place. I
Correct.
know that they, like I said, they hashed it out to say that it kind of wasn't, and Theo Vaughn came into an understanding, but he was like, "Dog, I mean, that's embarrassing for me. Like, I'm sitting there, a comedian. I get to and get invited to an inauguration day, which is a big deal for a comedian, and I get a prank pulled on by two absolute dweebs, the Paul brothers, and it's like, okay, like, what are we doing here?"
Yeah.
And God, man, the third one with inauguration day, and I think I just blanked on what I was gonna do. God, what happened?
I can add to your inauguration day
Yeah,
movie
go ahead.
list.
I can think of it.
I'd
You
have to
might
say
have it.
Elon. I'd say that Elon Musk
Yes,
with.
that's
I was like,
that's the
hey,
one.
dog, like you gotta like. I mean, like wave anything, salute, pound your heart,
Oh my god, the
anything
autism
but
levels were off the
the
charts.
Third Reich fucking hand gesture up. It was like, yikes, man.
Yeah.
Like anything else, like, oh,
Any
Jesus,
other
dude.
hand gesture would have probably worked. You could have stuck your middle fingers up in the air and done something like that would have been fine.
Yeah, it would have
But you
just been,
chose hand over the chest, angle it. I'm like,
yeah,
and they're gonna attack that. Like I said, like this administration, we've seen it for 4 years. Like they're gonna attack anything you give them,
yeah.
and
It
you
is,
just gave
it
them a
is.
fucking lottery ticket.
Yeah, it is pretty tough not to attack that. Like you saw that, and I was like, oh, this is not good.
Oh my god, man!
Put your arms down,
Yeah,
dude.
just wave, just
Yeah,
smile and wave. Like there
yeah.
ain't no reason to, hi Hudson, hi Hudson.
Yeah, this is tough, man. That's brutal. So, yeah, Elon Musk, maybe go over some more media training after this.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're definitely getting put in sensitivity training.
Yes, yes, and I would say the biggest OG of inauguration day was Barron Trump.
Jesus.
That dude is a unit. But anyway, that's all from me. They're all centralized around inauguration day. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, those are tough. Yeah, my other two were the Marcellus Wiley and Ryan Clark beef that's been going on. And we talked about it off stream. It's like, hey, just put the phone down. Like, y'all
Yeah,
are grown men.
go handle it.
Like, well, not even that. Like, any, like, even, like, Marcellus Wiley came out and said, like, hey, brother, I'm not gangster. Like, I ain't trying to do all that. Like, I'm grown. And he was like, neither are you. So, like, can we just drop it kind of thing? And so it's like, it's this whole society we're in where it's like, oh, we gotta one up everybody.
Yes.
We gotta get the last jab in. It's like, dude, just put your phone down.
Yeah.
Like, no one cares.
I got to win the like war.
Yeah,
How many views and engagement can I get off this clapback that I just did?
yeah, and it's
You know,
like, dog, y'all are like grown men. Like, just
grown.
yeah, like you're not 22-year-olds or whatever,
Yeah.
or y'all aren't, the American political system. Like, y'all are just two dudes that are just supposed to be talking sports. And so I clicked on like one tweet to look at it, and then that's all that's popped up on my feed is just like their responses. And I'm like, oh my god.
It almost
So
seems, with the algorithm, it's like it almost seems like they plan this stuff out. It's like,
yeah,
all right, we're gonna have beef today, and we're
yeah,
gonna get some. It's boring. There's nothing going on. There's no games till Friday. Let's just get the little senseless beef going on, and then like
yeah,
an hour later, Ryan Clark posts a clip from like the pivot about something completely different,
yeah.
and you're
It's
just
like,
like,
okay,
I don't understand. Like it's like nothing ever happened. So
yeah. And then
it
my last one, we'll go into more in depth of it later. I know, but it's the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they might be an eternal DB list candidate.
yes,
So I guess
yes,
Dallas Cowboy higher up organization. There we go.
yes. The deep state of the Dallas
Yes,
Cowboys.
yes,
Which in this deep state we know their names.
yes,
So
yes. So
yeah,
I guess if we wanted to roll into that, we could.
yeah. I say we roll into that, and then we'll finish off with the national championship stuff.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, I guess with the whole Dallas Cowboys coaching carousel is what they like to call it. Man, the different candidates that they've interviewed and the candidates that they have not chosen to interview, the debacle they got in with the Mike McCarthy. I guess what is your whole take on the situation?
yeah. So first off, let's put Mike McCarthy on the not DB list,
Correct.
and I guess we could call the BD list. And he basically got in that interview and was like, "Yeah, hell no, I'm out." And then
Yeah.
it comes out that everybody in the organization thought he would stay. And like I've said before, I really hope like in like 5 years or whatever, he gets on a podcast somewhere and just goes full torch mode and talks about like, hey, how was dealing with Jerry Jones? And he's like, all right, brother, well, let's open up this discussion for a good hour and a half. Like,
Right.
I'm really hoping for that. So first off, there's that. Second, um, it kind of sucks. It does suck because it's like we have all these names out there that we've interviewed, and then it's like they're already hired. Like Ben Johnson hired. It just came out today. Aaron Glenn hired. Robert Salah is probably going to get hired somewhere else, and
Yeah.
so we're kind of left with what normally happens, which is we've got our top five choices, and then choices 6 through 30 are the ones that seem to be higher up on the list. And
Correct.
so, my biggest thing is like what has always been is like, why wait so long? Two, it's obvious because everything's a show with them. And so like we had all the riffraff about Deion Sanders, and then that's quickly fizzled. And then we go through all these lists of candidates that we're gonna, interview, yada yada. I think we interviewed Anthony Lynn as well.
Yeah.
That would be a terrible
Leslie
one.
Frazier.
I don't think that one would be an awful one, but then it's like there's our top five, and then it's like Kellen Moore. Okay, he's probably gonna get hired somewhere else because he's still playing. Um, Schottenheimer, which I don't want to even dog this guy too bad
Yeah.
because it's
No.
like I don't hear any bad things about him. Like there's not some weird scandal going on about him or anything like that. But at the same time, you've interviewed him once, and you've had to interview him a second time for a dude that's been there for multiple years. Like, what else do you need to interview the guy about?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's like they keep using it's like the excuse keeps running out. It's like, hey, we don't want to change a coordinator because our quarterback's finally gotten used to it. It's like, yeah, but we just don't want to keep a bad coordinator.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's just kind of the gist of it is they're going to hire the person that one is the cheapest, so it's probably going to be Schottenheimer. Two, someone who knows how the organization is ran, aka do what the higher ups say. And
Right.
so we're going to get stuck in the same cycle that we always get in. So,
Yes.
it ultimately we're not going to get anybody in free agency. We're going to expect to hit on 7 draft picks, and then we're going to just keep doing this thing that we normally do. So,
Yes.
that's just it's tough. It's tough. What do you have to say about
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm in agreement. I mean, we're all the fans that are awake are not optimistic. The ones that say there's no hope, the ones that say like we're gonna continue this cycle, and there's no breaker of chains. No nothing. It's there is. I've talked about it before in previous episodes. It's like that there is no end in sight until there's a massive structure change within the organization, or just like a severing of the ego. And one thing that I've just been I harp on the most with every single coaching carousel that we've had in my recent memory, which I guess would be when Jason Garrett took over, when he was fired and we got McCarthy, and now is the fact that we always try and hire from within, or
it?
hire from, like, when we got Mike McCarthy, it's like this dude's been on a couch for 3 years
Yeah.
and hasn't coached anything. It was a name out of left field. It's like we thought this dude was done coaching. We didn't think he had any desire to return to the NFL. Then he returned to the NFL,
Yeah.
and that was going to be our leader of the future. It's like, okay, well, bigger name than what could have been out there. Like, it's Mike McCarthy. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been
15
to,
years ago.
yeah, 15 years ago, back when I was on the PSP.
Yeah.
Um, and he did some good things for us and whatnot, but it's like, is this really the guy that's going to get you over the hump, to
Yeah.
get you in that Super Bowl that we haven't been in 30 years? Knowing that, it just seems like the message has been clear from fans, from coaches, from analysts, from the media, from everyone, to say it has to go in a new direction, to where you have to step aside, you have to remove yourself from the team meetings, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and go get yourself a guy that's going to win football games in the way that he knows how, that he's going to develop the roster the way he sees fit, that he can use a quarterback like Dak Prescott to bridge in a new era of Dallas Cowboys quarterbacks, because there's no way Dak Prescott's playing for more than 4 or 5 more years.
Yeah.
So it's a short-term job, essentially, to say, I've got these guys, I've got big-time talent, I've got an edge rusher, I've got a receiver, I got a quarterback, I got a decent O-line. Let's work with it.
Yeah.
And their solution was a guy that we mutually parted ways with 2 or 3 years ago, in Kellen Moore, a offense coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, who's been around the league for 25 years and has yet to hold a head coaching job in his career in 25 years. He's only gone down. He's only been demoted. He's never been promoted. Your Rooney Rule interview with Leslie Frazier, a lot like the Marvin Lewis one a couple years back. And then, of course, Robert Saleh, which honestly, that one was intriguing to me, because it was like, okay, maybe he could be the DC. And then the other names were Jason Witten and Deion Sanders.
Yikes.
That's the pull that you decided to go. So for me, I guess to sum things up, is that whatever they choose out of this pool, it's not going to get you over the hump.
No.
It's just going to be a repeat cycle. And if you're Dak Prescott, like, I don't understand how you could want to be in the organization. It's so, the best way I know how to phrase it, and you've heard this term before, is it's so unserious.
Yeah.
It's the most, and we go play these teams, and I've got 49ers fans, Packers fans that I'm friends with. Bro, you get in that game, and they just laugh at you.
Yeah.
They just laugh at you, and you're just like, well, I'm not playing for them, for one. But two, it's like, yeah, you're right. It's laughable, dude. Like, what do you want me to say? And
yeah.
So, yeah.
And then you see, like, the carousel of coaches that have left. Like, I mean, they loved Kellen Moore. He left. They loved the old O-line coach. He left. Chris Richard left. Hell, Bones is leaving. And it's like, I mean, the dude had a cake job. He produced, I mean, say what you will. He produced, I mean, Maher. He produced Aubrey. Hell, Greg Zuerlein at the end of his stint with the Cowboys was like 17 for 17.
Yeah.
I mean, Cavante Turpin, I mean, say what you want about him on offense. Dude is an electric returner.
Yes.
And, like, Hunter has been all pro. And, like, the dude that has kind of built a special teams organization is like, nah, I'm out too. And it just goes to show you, like, what you say is, like, we're unserious, and as much as they want to act like they are, we're unserious about winning football games.
Yes.
And so that's the tough part is, like, and unfortunately, we're going to keep watching. But now it seems like a lot of Cowboy fans and media have kind of rallied around the idea is like, hey, our new standard and bar is not here anymore. We need to expect, it's off the screen, but down here towards the waist level. And then if something happens, yay, we're excited. Because, I mean, say what you want about McCarthy. I mean, we had we were the 1 seed twice and 3 12-5 seasons or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, like, we made no noise in the playoffs. Like, he did what he knows how to do and got us there. And then we knew what we couldn't do. The only the coaches that I've seen that I'm excited about are the 2 running back coach options that we saw. And I think it was Shard Choice and DeMarco Murray were interviewing for it. And I'm like, man, get DeMarco Murray in here. Maybe he could strap it up and run for a few as well.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I've just been like, dude, like I have a student in my program that big Dallas Cowboys fan as well. And he's just texting me, blowing me up all the time about, like, I mean, you'd think he was an insider with how much he blows me up about the new coaches. And I'm like, hey, brother, just all these things you're sending me, like, just don't believe it. And the one that you may be okay but not excited about, expect that, and then, just wait for a step below that. And that's what you're going to get. So, and it's going to happen in, like, when's the draft? March? It's going to happen, like, the day before the draft or something like that. So,
you're
it's just frustrating.
Quoting exactly what I posted was, it's going to be at the 11th hour. It's going to be a name out of left field that no one thought to expect, Schottenheimer, and we're going to be disappointed. Those 3 things are all in line to happen right now. I mean,
absolutely.
They didn't even interview Ben Johnson, or call him. They didn't even interview Aaron Glenn, but they expressed interest. They refused to opportunity between Mike McCarthy and Chicago Bears just to say, they said, nope, you can't do that. Talk contracts, Mike McCarthy, I'm out.
Yeah.
Then he goes and interviews with the Chicago Bears. It's laughable. It's unserious, and we'll get into it much more in the off season. I'm sure, especially around draft time. So it's like that one guy said. He said, "You're so close. You just need a running back, a second receiver, a couple of O-linemen, a right tackle, a linebacker, another edge rusher, maybe we could talk about safety and another DB. You're so close. You're almost there.
One of those, it's like, oh god.
Oh my god, you just got hit on. The one guy, the comment at the end from that clip was hilarious. The one guy just said, "Yeah, you said you just need 4 first-round draft picks, and 7 of them need to hit."
Exactly.
It's like these guys understand. So
yes,
yeah. Okay, national championship time, and then we'll wrap this puppy up. Save the best for last. Well, the best topic in area of sports for last. Definitely not the best game. National championship between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Now, I guess you can call this an example of the 12-team playoff as an expanded market, because neither of these teams were in the top 4, from what I understand, going into, I think they were number 7 and 8. Yes. Ohio State didn't play for a conference title. They lost twice during the regular season, once to Oregon, another one to Michigan, which was embarrassing at the end of the year. Notre Dame doesn't play a conference title, which I've been told by every Notre Dame fan known to man that this is the way it should be, and that they should not be a part of a conference for X, Y, and Z all the way through A all the way through Z. But both these teams made it, and we saw clearly that the better team was Ohio State. Much more high-powered offense. Will Howard much more efficient. Jeremiah Smith incredible, and that these DBs for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, yeah, they're damn good against who they were playing. But when they got to Ohio State, and I'm not going to knock them for saying they're not worth the shit. I'm just saying that was the first time I think they were truly tested with wide receiver talent that was just out the roof. Because we saw, Georgia had a lot of issues at receiver throughout the whole year. I think they were number 1 and they had the most drops or whatever it was. And then, the backup quarterback. But I guess getting into the scope of the game is where I'll let you take over here, because it was a blowout. The scoreboard didn't finalize that way, but it was a blowout.
Yeah, I think we all, by the first half, we were all like, good God, here we go.
Yeah.
But I think Ryan, the analyst, termed it as best as he could, is that first drive from Notre Dame when they scored basically summed up like this national championship is like. He basically said, like, there's no way Notre Dame could sustain this. And it's like, they came out and you would have thought they were like, Army or Navy or Georgia Tech or old school Georgia Tech or something. Like,
2.5 yard runs. All the way.
10 plays and Riley Leonard ran on 9 of them. I'm like, brother, what are we doing? And it was like, they scored, and then it was like, boop, boop, Ohio State 7-7. It was like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
And so that was just like, from that first drive from them, I was like, dude, like, y'all's defense is good, but it ain't that good. Yeah. And so, getting to the scope of things, like you termed it as best as you could. The better team won. The better athletes won. The better weapons won. I mean, you could see that. I mean, Ohio State had 6 weapons on offense that were just almost unstoppable. I mean, you look at Carnell Tate, who, like, you don't really hear much about in like the last 3 games. Like, everybody's like, oh, Smith, Igbuka, like all that, and then Tate's catching 8 or 9 catches a game. And then they, like, this is the epitome of, like, I guess you could say running back by committee. But I mean, that's what they did, is they were like, hey, we're gonna do this. Y'all are gonna get 10 to 15 carries a game, and y'all are always gonna be fresh.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. The better team won, the better athletes won. And that's just what you saw. And you don't really hear about much of Ohio State's defense because the score became much closer. But their defense played well in the first half.
Yeah.
And, kind of like we talked a little bit before we did the pod, is like, it kind of seemed a little scripted, because it was like, when they got in the second half, I mean, they might as well have just kneeled the ball 3 times and kicked it away with how they were trying to run the offense outside of the one play that Will Howard threw. But yeah, to sum it all up, it was kind of a boring game. And then it looked like, the guy with the puppets was playing everything, and it was like, oh, this got kind of close. And then it was like, not close. So
yeah, it felt like,
perfect.
In comparison, it felt like when Dash and the Incredibles is running at the track meet.
Yeah.
And the guy, Mr. Incredible, is like, make it close, go for second, go for second. And, that he had clearly the ability to just blow away the competition and run away with, an outstanding blowout, victory if you're Ohio State. And then the committee and whoever was pulling the strings was like, well, they're going to get pissed at Notre Dame for not being good enough to be here again. So we're going to have to make this one close. And,
Yeah.
there was that, doink off the field goal that would have made it, a 6-point game. But like you mentioned, the only play that I felt like the Ohio State offense was even trying to score in the second half was the one where it became a one possession game, and Ohio State looked at the sideline and said, "Oh, we need to score here. Oh yeah, ready, set," and it's 80-yard bomb to Jeremiah Smith inside the red zone. It was like, "Oh, you want us to try harder and just secure this dub?" Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll just one play right here, and it was just so easy for them, and they were, 7-8 play drives down the field, doing what they need to do the entire ball game until basically the third quarter, where Notre Dame got 4 opportunities to score, and the defensive backs were like, "We'll play 15 yards off.
Yeah.
We'll back up. We'll play cover 9, cover 4, and just we'll drop 8 into coverage or whatever." It's like, who cares? Like,
yeah,
it was a blowout, and it wasn't close. And I think I did see that the game was the third lowest viewed national championship game on record. It was like 22.9 million. And the other semifinals were not good either.
Yeah.
And I really think that's because of the teams that were in it.
Yeah. And to add to your point, the 3 things I really took away from this game was like, okay, obviously the Jeremiah Smith towards the end of the game where it was like, oh, he's single coverage. It was literally like they looked at him like, yeah, we're better than you. Boom, completion. And then the second one was the field goal attempt from Notre Dame when you were down 2 scores. I'll never understand that logic. Is like you're down, what was it, 16?
Yeah, or no, yeah, 16.
You're down 16 and you're going to kick a field goal to make it still 2 scores or something like that. I'm like, what's the point? And then you miss it. You rush everybody on there and then you miss it. And then the third point, to get to what you're saying about the lower viewership, is like, why is this on Monday?
Yes, yeah.
Like, dude.
I've been riding with Joel Klatt's theology.
Yeah, like,
I love that guy.
How hard is it to put this on a Friday night?
Yeah.
And obviously you don't want it to get in the way with NFL or whatever. I get that. Put it on a Friday night. Everybody gets done and they're like, you're done with your week, whatever. That's when everybody's probably gonna be like, hey, let's go grab a drink, whatever. And you're like, oh shit, we have the national football, the national championships on tonight. But you end your week with football and you're like, oh, NFL playoffs, and you're like, oh wow, the national championship is a Monday night.
Yeah.
Like, dude, do that at 7
understood.
o'clock on Friday, and I would assume you'd get double the views.
Oh, I would say triple.
Yeah, and so I'm like, it just doesn't make sense.
Oh,
but I do
yeah.
agree that like nobody wanted to see Notre Dame and Ohio State in it.
Yeah. And it's a scheduling issue. I mean, Joe Klatt talked about it. He said we should just make it New Year's Day and have it, that's our day. That's college football's day. Whatever day that falls on. It's like, yeah, I think it should be the first week of January, on, like you say, on a Friday, to where it's like we get done with our week and it's time to grab a brewski and go watch the game. But nobody, I sent a tweet out that got a lot of viewership about saying, dude, I had to remind like 50 people that the national championship was on.
Yeah.
Like no one knew because it's a Monday. Everybody is meal prepping for the week. They're throwing in chicken and dumplings. They're tired from their first day at work. They're prepping for the damn snowstorm. Like no one cares on a Monday. And then you can't go out and do anything because, well, tomorrow you have work. So I kind of
kicked over my water
I
bottle.
flinched a little bit there. I almost pulled a weapon.
I shit my pants.
Yeah, it's on air.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's like, because like you said, you have all this, because the bowl game stopped, 4 weeks ago, and then you've got the playoff games, which I thought that scheduling was great. You do, 2 a night basically on Friday, Saturday, or Thursday, Friday, whichever one. And then you get here and you wait another week, and then you play on a Monday, and it's like, dude,
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't like you're exactly right about like Monday you get done with the work day, worst day of the week, and then you're like, you're not gonna go out and do anything. It's like, and then you get this
Yeah.
snooze fest in the first half, and I'm sure half the people turned it off.
Yeah. I'm still on board with the fact that Saturday is college football's day.
Yeah,
And the college football fans understand that Saturday is the day. So whenever the NFL schedules games on Saturday, I still think college football fans would rather tune into college football on a Saturday.
absolutely.
And because I forget that the NFL is on Saturday sometimes, and I'm like, well, oh, I've got things to do. I'm not really going to tune in at 2:30 on a Saturday to
Yeah,
watch
what
the
a
NFL.
brutal time.
Yeah, I'm like, it just makes zero sense to me. But if you said, you know, semifinal games, we got one at 4:30 and one at 7:30. Those are your semifinal matchups to get to the national championship. It's on a Saturday, and you're like, well, let's lock in. Like,
Yeah,
it just honestly, we need to consider doing like, because the off season is just now started for the college football, but like as we get closer to like July, August, is kind of run like a little marathon of how to fix college football in our
yeah,
eyes, and say, if we're going to do a 12 team, how would we rank it? If we're going to do scheduling and strength of schedule, how would we do the conference games? Do we do this model that Joe Klatt suggested, the 9-1-2 model or whatever it is? Or do we do this? And,
yeah,
scheduling, what day do we want the national championship? Bowl games, when do we want the, all that sorts of thing. And because you can get into it for like an hour, there's
yeah.
a lot of problems with college football.
Oh yeah. Well, it's
And
just
we still
like a
enjoy it.
lot of
So,
things they do. It's like they're like, oh, we're just gonna see how it goes, and it's like, dude, just take a little time, think about it,
yeah.
process it. Let's see what happens. Not just like, hey, we're doing a 12-man football playoffs. Let's see how let's ride.
Let's just put
Like,
12 teams in and go. Like,
yeah, and it's like that. It just made no sense. And so I could understand like the college playoffs, the first year, everything, it's all weird,
yeah.
but like scheduling on a Monday, like it's always been like that, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So
The last thing I'll say about it is, with a lot of things, this happens in the popular franchise called Call of Duty, and I'm not a Call of Duty player anymore, but the number one argument with their games is, if you just listen to the fans, if you just listen to them, you would make a great product. And I relate that to college football. It's like the committee is just trying everything in their power to do it, to say, okay, we're the committee, we got to decide. When you could just depend, it's almost like a democracy. It's like you depend on the fans to create your big product, because that's what makes up your product is the people watching, the people attending the games. And I think if you had at least a percentage of it that was lenient on fan engagement, whether it be a petition, whether it be whatever, to say, if we said these things, would y'all be okay with it? An approval of some sort. But there's
absolutely,
there's a lot
absolutely.
to fix.
That's
I
a
just
great
think,
comparison with Call of Duty. Great
yeah,
comparison.
exactly. Well, thank you. I think we covered. I think we dotted every I. We got the brass tacks. We crossed every T. So honestly, I think we covered everything we need to cover.
Yeah, hour and 8 minutes. That's a record.
That is a record. We ain't got the analyst mouthing on. No, no, I'm fine. Okay, yeah. So we'll get back at it next week with. This was the Shatter the Script episode. We'll get back at it next week with regular scheduled program. You get the stats and scars back in motion, and by that time it'll be the NFL championship game, and I think that's it. Get into the offseason, go into the draft process. So
yeah, start talking some hockey and some baseball, huh?
there we go. Yeah, little big names we moving around in the MLB over there. So
yeah,
college baseball is going to ramp up. So
yes, sir.
All right, looking forward to it. Well, thank you for joining on. You can find us on all platforms with the handle at Shatter the Script. We support video on Spotify, Apple Podcasts for audio, and YouTube as well. Content will be out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. So, see y'all next week. Great episode. Shatter the Script.